Hi, thanks for joining me today. This is the third podcast in the Living Sensationally series in which we explore the gifts of your senses while you take a break in your routines. I'm Winnie Dunn, an occupational therapist and professor at the University of Kansas, where we study people's reactions to sensory experiences in their everyday lives. Today, I want to tell you about the 4 sensory patterns so you can crack your own sensory code and perhaps those of your friends and family. Let's see if I can succeed in helping you crack your sensory code before you finish your tea or coffee. In the last podcast, we talked about your reactions to sensory input and began to consider how you might react differently from other people to sounds and touch and everything else. Research shows us that there are 4 basic patterns of responses, and these 4 patterns can help you understand yourself and others in a little more detail. The 4 patterns are based on how the brain works and how you tend to respond. We covered that in the first podcast. Your brain has a set point for action based on a system of thresholds. This means that if there is an amount of input your brain needs to respond, and each of us has our own, the amount your brain needs is different from the amount that someone else's brain needs, and this is part of the reason you respond differently than a friend or coworker. When the threshold for responding is low, then you react more often, and when the threshold is high, you react less frequently. If you have a low threshold, people might consider you observant or vigilant or picky. If you have a high threshold, people might consider you laid back or easygoing or flaky. Each of us falls somewhere on the scale from low to high thresholds. You might notice that people use positive or negative words to describe these things based on whether they think that way of behaving is great or annoying. You also regulate your responses on a continuum. Some people let things happen and then respond, while others exercise more control over what happens around them. So when we consider the thresholds and your responses, we get 4 patterns. Seekers have a high threshold and an active self-regulation, so they do things to get more sensation. Bystanders have high thresholds, but they have passive self-regulation, so they just let things happen. Avoiders have low thresholds and active self-regulation, so they are trying to get away from things more often. Sensors also have low thresholds, but they have passive self-regulation, so they more often find themselves in places where they get overwhelmed. These are great ideas, and they're challenging things about each pattern. Let's discuss how each of the sensory systems looks during everyday life. Seekers love sensation, and they look for ways to get more. If you love auditory input, you have your music on all the time. If you love touch, you have clothing or furniture with luxurious textures. If you love taste and smell, you select ethnic foods. Or if you love movement and body position input, you might run and lift weights for exercise. Life is lively for you if you're a seeker. However, your efforts to get more sensation can also be distracting for you. In your effort to keep things interesting, a critical element of your work or recreation can get overlooked. For example, if you're experimenting with a recipe, adding a new flavor or ingredient, your interest in this new part could also distract you from remembering a standard ingredient that is important to the success of the recipe, like baking powder, in order for a cake to rise. Your need to change things up can also drive friends and family and coworkers crazy. They might enjoy routines, so changing the agenda of a meeting or the family rituals could be upsetting to them, even though it keeps things interesting for you. Seekers are great for idea generation and not so great for sustaining routines. So if you're a seeker, volunteer for creative aspects of a project rather than the detail work. Everyone will be happier. Avoiders really love routines and organization. Since avoiders have low thresholds, doing things the same way reduces the amount of new sensory experiences they must encounter each day. If you're an avoider, you tend to feel uncomfortable when a situation is unpredictable. Your nervous system can only tolerate a little bit of new information at a time. You're likely to eat the same breakfast, take the same path to work, and want meetings to have a predictable cadence and agenda. You bring the same lunch to work and you wonder why other people keep changing what they bring for lunch. Life is organized if you're an avoider. You will also look for times you can get away from other people in busy environments. It isn't that you dislike people, they just make a lot of noise and bump into you or do other unexpected things that can overwhelm you. You tend to be very skilled in your interest areas because you spend a lot of time alone and enjoy studying the right way to do things. If you're an avoider, you might have friends or family that express concern that you don't get out more or that you spend too much time alone. Others don't understand that you both enjoy and need time away to regroup from the chaos of everyday life with other people. You might bother other people because you try to control schedules or environments, putting things away to keep workspaces clear of clutter when other people are still working on something, for example. Family might miss you at a gathering even though you're perfectly happy to be by yourself. Avoiders are great organizers, so offer to keep the storage cabinets in order, design the weekly meeting agenda, or compile the quarterly reports. Avoiders are not so great at spontaneous activities, so do not offer to be in the last-minute brainstorming session. People interrupting each other with ideas can bring out the worst in you. Bystanders are very different from avoiders. Bystanders need a lot of input because they have high thresholds. And so if you're a bystander, you probably miss things that are going on around you. This makes you really easygoing, and it makes it possible to concentrate even in busy places. People might think you just let things roll off your back, but the truth is you don't notice what might bother other people. You might also seem not to care, but the truth is that you might care about a situation, you just need to notice it first. If you're a bystander, people like having you around. The fact that you don't get bothered easily makes you a great companion, especially for intense people that might be more irritating to others. You don't notice all the quirky behaviors, so you can remain pleasant. However, you can also miss information you need, like when to pick up the dog from the kennel or the time your plane leaves. Since you can work with distractions, you can offer to work in open spaces where others would be less productive and can also be counted on to change schedules easily. It is not a good idea for you to be in charge of the minutes of a meeting because you're likely to miss a comment or a recommendation that matters for planning. Make yourself lists and check in with others to make sure you have all the information you need. Sensors are very precise people. They notice a lot of details. If you're a sensor, you want everything to be just so. For you, just so means that there is just the right amount of whatever sensations you are sensitive about. If you are sensitive to sounds, you have a specific volume that is right. You might want only orange juice without pulp and might even strain the orange juice again to make sure there is no texture in it. You can tell right away if someone moves something on a table or a counter, and you definitely prefer to drive because other people start and stop too abruptly for you. You are also good at detecting a shift in someone's mood, which makes people feel cared for. As a sensor, you can have challenges finding clothing because you notice tags, textures, seams, or unevenness in how something lays on your skin. You might also have only selected restaurants and menu items that are acceptable, narrowing your social options. You are also happy to keep others informed about these needs, which can be irritating to others who want more variety. You might drive others crazy adjusting lighting, volume, and timing of activities. You want everything in a particular way, which might be in conflict with other people's needs. If you're a sensor, offer to be in charge of the details of a work project. You will notice errors in documents, remember to order supplies, keep a precise log of activities, and will have strategies for keeping track of vital information. You should not offer to take care of last-minute emergencies. You will notice too many messy details and might miss the overall factor that needs to be dealt with while you handle the details. Okay, so now you know a little bit about the 4 sensory patterns. Do you have some ideas about your own patterns? Are you thinking of a situation in which the patterns at home or work collided? Is there something that you might be more understanding of because you see why the other people were so insistent about having things their way? If you want more detailed information, you can take the sensory patterns checklist in the book Living Sensationally. We will also get more detailed in future podcasts. There are 2 more concepts I want to make sure you understand. First, I know some of you are thinking, well, I'm this pattern at home and another pattern at work. You are right that you may display different patterns in different places. Your sensory patterns are actually a reflection of you inside of a situation or context. Work holds certain characteristics that you will react to, just like home or a restaurant or the grocery store. At home, it is likely that you set things up to be the most comfortable for you, so some of your more edgy features might not surface there. For example, if you're sensitive to light, you select low lighting at home, have certain curtains or drapes to control the light. You don't have that same control at work, so you can be more irritable there. The environments have either good or challenging characteristics for people, and that is what determines how your sensory patterns show up or remain in the background in a particular place. You might also be a seeker for movement, but not a seeker for sounds. We're complex beings, so having those differences is just the way it is. Knowing them is what gives you the power to make your life sensational. Finally, also remember that sensory patterns are just one way to understand your behavior. There are other ways too. Every different way helps you understand yourself and others better. Take advantage of every opportunity to learn. If you want to know more, the book Living Sensationally, Understanding Your Senses has more ideas for you. You can also go to the Living Sensationally Facebook page or the Living Sensationally blog for more stories. So here's a project for you. Pick 2 environments in your life. Analyze what is helpful and what is challenging about each environment from a sensory point of view. Are they the same sensations in each environment? Or does one environment provide support for you and the other does not? The next time we meet here in podcast land, I will explain how your sensory patterns affect your daily life routines. I know you can't wait. Live sensationally until then. This is Winnie Dunn, signing off.